I'm going to be talking today about a later medieval debate called the plurality of forms debate. First, I'm going to talk about the plurality of forms debate sort of in brief, what it was about. And then I'm going to go to one particular very, very exaggerated example of the plurality of forms debate in Jean of Jandun. You all can see the screen? Good. Okay, so the plurality of forms debate. The motivation behind it, let's just start with the most basic thing, hylomorphism. You get some prime matter, you get some substantial form, and you get out of that a primary substance, an instance, one individual of a natural kind. And as you all know, the prime matter gets structured by the substantial form, and the substantial form gives the composite, the hylomorphic composite, a range of properties, both accidental and essential. These are the characteristics that the prime substance has. And so the question, the plurality of forms debate is, how many substantial forms are necessary and sufficient for any particular type of substance? How many substantial forms do you need? Okay. Well, there are two basic views. There's a unicity view, on which there's just one substantial form necessary, and then there's a plurality view on which there is more than one, and it depends a little bit on how many there are. The unicity view, one could appeal to Aristotle as a fairly good reason for holding that there's just one substantial form. At the beginning of his the second book of his De Anima, Aristotle talks about, let's go with he makes an analogy between the eye, and an animal. He says that if the eye were an animal, then sight would be its soul. Okay. And then he goes on, he says that if sight were to leave the eye, then it would be an eye homonymously, so in name only. And so you could read this as saying that if an animal dies, if its substantial form, if its soul leaves it, what's left behind has nothing to do with the animal. And it looks as though that means that there's just one substantial form that gets shifted out and a new substantial form comes. So this text could be used as a way of motivating the unicity of substantial form view. At least that's the way that Thomas Aquinas used it, the most famous unicity person in the plurality of forms debate. Aquinas's super argument is here for nothing is unconditionally one except through the one form, through which that, I'm sorry, my Zoom is overlapping with the text, so I can't see it, through which that thing has existence, because a thing's being existent and its being one thing come from the same source. It's a really powerful argument. The unity of a primary substance comes from a substantial form. So if you're going to have just one thing, then it's got to have just one substantial form. It's a very elegant solution to the hylomorphic composite. Instead of having sort of building blocks, Lego blocks, putting together where you have various things with different substantial forms together, Aquinas says one primary substance, one individual human being, one individual cow, one individual substantial form. That's a unicity debate. Here's the reason you might want to reject that and be a pluralist. There are lots of reasons. I'll just take the first one, what you call pre-theoretical worries. So take that there were just one form, and it was like Aristotle said, that an eye, as soon as it's no longer able to see, is no longer an eye. Well, let's transfer that to an animal, to Russ Friedman. You're watching Russ Friedman give a talk, and he has a heart attack, and he falls over and he dies. At least in the Western European view, I think it's fair to say that there's a strong intuition to say that the body that's lying there right after the death belongs to Russ. It's Russ's body. And that would not be the case on the Aristotelian and the Thomas Aquinas view, where the body has nothing whatsoever to do with Russ because there's a different substantial form there. This is the reason that some medieval thinkers were pluralists about substantial form. They thought that there had to be at least two substantial forms. For example, a rational soul, and then a form of the body, the corporeal form, that gave the body its shape and size, and that also guaranteed identity even if the rational soul disappears. So that's the Late medieval debate on the plurality of forms in brief. Here's a really radical view about the plurality of forms by a guy named John of Jandun. John was from northern France. He was an arts master at the University of Paris in the area around 1305 to 1326. He died in 1328. He's well known as an Aristotle commentator. He's left us lots and lots of Aristotle commentators. But as Zita showed the other day, he was heavily influenced, or yesterday, heavily influenced philosophically by the Muslim polymath Averroes. Now, this is what John of Jandun says. Sorry, I have to, there, now I figured it out. This is what John of Jandun says about the plurality of forms debate. And this is a really important view of Jandun. It's being cited and linked to his name 300 years later in the early 17th century. Jandun says, there is, therefore, also in the most special species, for example, in a human being, one substantial form through which the human being is a human being, and another form through which the human being is an animal, and another through which it is a body, and so on, by ever ascending up to the most general genus, i.e. substance, because there are as many really diverse forms as there are genera. And even if in the ascent there were 1,000 univocal genera, there would then be that many substantial forms in the most special species, really and per se diverse from one another. So the idea is that for each and every essential predicate that can truly be said of some hylomorphic composite, there corresponds a really different or distinct substantial form. That's the idea there. And the person who's really isolated this view is Bob Pasnow in his book, Metaphysical Themes, and he writes, a substantial form corresponds to each of the thing's essential predicates up and down the Porphyrian tree. So the idea is, take a female human being, Georgia. You can predicate about Georgia that she's human, animal, living, corporeal, and substance. And for John of Jandun, that means that she has really distinct from each other a substantial form of humanity, animality, animateness, so livingness, corporeality, and substantiality. The idea behind John of Jandun's view is, I think it's fair to say, a strong epistemological realism. If we can talk about an essential feature of a thing, then there has to be something in the thing backing up the concept that we're using to talk about it like that. So for John of Jandun, a substantial form needs to explain at least three things. So first, let's talk about Socrates, the human being, and Brownie, the donkey, right? We got to say the concept, the predicate animal has to be explained, one more time. The substantial forms of animal needs to explain why Socrates, the human being, and Brownie, the donkey are both animals, why we have univocal genus concepts, or the univocal genus concept animal from both of them, the human being, Socrates, and the donkey, Brownie, and why we can truly predicate the term animal univocally of both of them. That's what John of Jandun is trying to explain. I'm just going to look very briefly at an argument that he makes. This argument is where he gives some of, I'm not going to read the text, but he gives some of the rationale behind this view. So you can see here, I've bolded, if the concepts of animal, if the concept of animal is not made up, then the concept is derived or accepted from diverse substantial forms in the thing. So that's his view. This is the epistemological realism I was talking about before. The idea that you have to have something ontologically, with some ontological existence of its own, in the thing, in this case a substantial form, to back up any essential concepts that you have of the thing. So it's a strong view of epistemological realism. I don't think I'm going to have time to talk about it, but I could talk about in the questions and answer period. There is, of course, a real problem for Jandun, and this is a problem recognized in the later period. there's a slippery slope problem. He says in the quotation I already gave you that if there are 1,000 essential predicates, then there would be 1,000 substantial forms. How exactly does he make sure that there aren't 1,000 essential predicates? For example, you could talk about wax, a little lump of wax. Is the wax is being shapeable? Is that an essential predicate? Or you see human beings that are syllogizing. Is syllogizing its own essential predicate? Or is that part of rationality? And so Jandun needs to come up with a way of fighting against that sort of slippery slope. He has a way, but I think I'll leave that for the question answer period. Thank you very much.